Hi, my name is Thomas O'Connor and this is Manor Organic Farm in Glownagalt on the Dingle Peninsula. I own and run Manor Organic Farm in here and our shop in Tralee with my wife Claire. We're here on the farm about 17 years now, and it was a 25-acre sheep farm when we bought it and took it over. And in the last 17 years, we've been planting up trees and making a bit of biodiversity inside in it. As soon as we decided we were going to be growing our own food and selling it, the first thing we wanted to do was become organic. There was no insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, real basics around animal welfare. It was the only way to go because we had learned a lot about the industrial food system, and a lot of the issues we saw around climate and environment were connected with all these inputs into our agriculture and our food, and also connected with our health. So yes, for us, the most important thing was to be certified organic, but it's still only a foundation. We use agroecology, permaculture, biodynamics, a whole lot of other ways of growing and making sure the food is just not poisoned, that it's actually really good, nutritious and environmentally beneficial. So we have our Manna field where we grow our salad and veg. That's about 4 acres. We have our permaculture field here where we have our apple trees, plum trees and fruit bushes. That's another 4 acres. We have our agroforestry field where we have terraces and short-term coppiced planted in there, and we've 13 acres of native woodland. If you look at our farm now, it looks like a woodland from the road, whereas in the past it was just ryegrass. So we've a lot of stuff going on. Down in the Manna field where we have the veg and the salad, at the start I was using a tractor and rotavator, so I was chopping up the ground every year, and I could see a decline in our veg. The first year or two was great when you were going from pasture into vegetables, but as I continued to rotivate and break up the ground every year, I could see a decline. So then we started shifting the way that we were growing inside in the veg with 1 metre pathways and 1 metre beds to grow in, so there was less compactation. I got rid of my tractor and I got a 2-wheel tractor with a tine cultivator and a flail mower, and that now is the tool that we use in growing the veg and the salads. But the land transforms quite a bit and quite fast from what it used to be. When we did an EIP with Talamh Bio on soil biodiversity, and one of the projects we did for ourselves on that was the woodland here, to try and shift the woodland from a grass dominated, bacterial dominated environment to a more fungal dominated. So the idea there was to turn around and add more carbon through rimmel chipwood, and by turning around and letting the grass grow higher and undercutting it so there's more of a carbon content, and then introducing garden giants and their biology into the area. Garden giants, they're a large mushroom, they're a primary digester. We use them for starting our compost process, but also in our pats and our beds, they break down the wood chips along the pathways and they start making soil out of it. Normally we'd let that break down a bit and then we add it in with our seaweed for our composting system. Fungi are extremely important for dissolving minerals in rocks and feeding them back to plants. It's really important for holding macro aggregates together inside in the soil and creating that web, and that allows air and water move up and down through the soil, which means that all the anaerobic biology that we need for a healthy soil is doing well. But they're primary digesters. So there's a couple of types, like the garden giant that's above. It's saprophytic, so it feeds on dead wood. So it's great for turning around and turning that wood into soil. Then you have mycorrhiza fungi that grow inside, out and around roots of plants, and they have more of a symbiotic direct connection, as in the roots of the mycelium physically grow into the plant itself or around it. The plant sends out exudates and it tells the fungi to go off and get at something. It's usually phosphorus, so they tell us we have a phosphorus shortage. We have no shortage of phosphorus, we have a shortage of mycelium in the ground to break it down, because the mycelium themselves have a symbiotic relationship with a phosphorus releasing bacteria. So the fungi are connected to the plants. The plant tells the fungi it wants some phosphorus. The fungi tells the bacteria to make me phosphorus. Then it feeds it back and sugars are transported in between. Yeah, it's a huge system. It's fantastic. I fell in love with a fella called Paul Stamets about 20 years ago, and he has a great book on mycelium running, how mushrooms can save the world, and he does a lot of stuff around the bees and things like that. So there's a lot of solutions to the issues we're facing, but they are about us relearning how to work again with natural systems and with nature. And as science has advanced, and citizen science and farmer science, then we turn around and getting more and more connected with it. Like one of the things with the EIP that we do at Talamh Bio is each of the farmers on it got a microscope, and we were trained up in the Elaine and Ingham course so we can understand what biology is happening in the soil. And when you take a bit of soil and you look into it and you see everything that's happening in under your feet, or you take a bit of soil and you see absolutely nothing, it's very clear the difference in our practices and what we put on the ground. Inside in this area itself, in our permaculture area, we divided it up into 7 sections, and we planted hawthorn one direction and blackthorn the other. And the idea was to create microclimates so that our apple trees and our fruit trees would thrive, because we were told that there's no way you could plant an orchard on the side of the hill here that nothing would survive. So shelter belts are extremely important. Then around all the perimeter, we planted in oak as the main primary trees that you see there. And then behind that, we have a solid bank of hawthorn, and there's some mountain ash in there, and there's some hazel mixed in with that as well. And the idea again is to create shelter, because we're wide open to the sea here to the north, and then our back is to the mountain, which tends to be quite gusty. But it is amazing, as the trees have developed over the last 15 years and grown up, they've created lovely microclimates, and each area is kind of different. And then even within the hedgerows, we have tayberries and raspberries, and we have a load of berries planted into the hedges and the ditches. The idea is to feed the biodiversity on the edge so that it's less likely to eat what we've grown on the inside. In our seed savers section, just the area below this, we have 130 apple trees, and there have 27 different varieties from seed savers. And like I was saying, about a third of those do okay, and 2/3 do quite well. So it's a natural selection process. It's kind of, and in the first couple of years, we didn't look after them very well. So it was survival of the fittest. So like we'll propagate off of those then, like once we know the apple trees that we like. And we do a lot of stuff now around. So all the apple trees and fruit trees that are here are on rootstocks, and we're doing air pruning to bring them back to their own rootstock, so they'll grow bigger and we can plant them out into the hedgerows and the ditches. An apple is generally a genetic copy of an apple that they like. If you took an apple seed and put it in the ground and grew it, you'd have a different tasting apple to what you originally had. So they always take grafts, and when they take the graft, it's a twig, and then they put that onto a rootstock, and a rootstock would be something that's related to that apple that would genetically take the timber, but it actually the idea is it restricts its growth. So for a commercial orchard, you can have nice small trees, or you can have big trees or medium trees. So what it does is the rootstock controls it. What I'm trying to do is bring the apple trees back to their genetic rootstock, which means they will grow up into massive trees altogether, which is ideal for forests or inside in woodlands and things like that, where you're not necessarily trying to harvest them all the time. We're not trying to compete with the main supermarkets, because we know the quality of fruit in the first place is coming in through those long supply chains is very different to something that's produced locally. So what we have is we have apples that are available at a particular time of the year. They're sold at the same price as we get our other organic apples in the shop, and that's it. So we don't see ourselves necessarily as competing, but obviously it is, because when food is so cheap, it undermines your ability to be able to make a proper living out of doing it. Because in a system like this, even harvesting the fruit, it all takes time. But as we go into the future, the ability for that fruit to be transported over long distances is going to get more expensive and harder due to environmental change. So having islands like this and having people grow their own apples is extremely important. I mean, like fruit, apples grow extremely well in Ireland. It's an absolute shame that there's so much of it imported. And that's why we like the idea of seed savers, that a fella got on his bike, about 40-50 years ago, saw the potential of loss of the genetic diversity of our apple trees, collected them, planted them at his friend's farm, and then all of a sudden 30 years later you have a huge genetic resource. The amount of knowledge and information that's available to us now, even more than 10 or 15 years ago, is phenomenal. A whole load of science is coming together, especially understanding of biology under the soil and the impact that has on what's above the soil. It's a living willow structure. At the moment, I have our pigs inside in it, our coons, coon and a pot belly. They're small, they're really friendly, and they have lovely layers of fat in with their meat. We stuck in willow rods either side, give them 2 years to grow up, and then we folded them in and wrapped them on top of each other, and it creates a nice shelter. It means we can put a mobile house in there without getting blown away. And then during the height of the summer, because it was originally for our chickens, it keeps the heat off of them. We used to have pigs years ago. We had an Iron Age boar and we had 2 Tamworth sows, and we used them to create terraces over in the agroforestry section and to clear a lot of the ground in where we planted the woodland in the end. But Samson was about that high and he had tusks like that, and they were beasts of things once they got out, and they were really good to deal with, but they were beasts. Whereas you'll see these lads are tiny. Eggs are a really good way of bringing in additional income in, recycling a lot of the waste that are inside, and they do a great job in pecking and scratching. And I do sheet compost mulching, so I'd have a couple of feet of wood chips and the mycelium running through it, and then the chickens are pecking and scratching through that all the time and aerating it, and then dropping their nitrogen, and all that's been captured and used again. The chickens come from forests in the first place, and they come from batches of about 50 to 100. That's their natural environment. They like to peck and scratch. If you give any animal what's good for its natural instinct, then you have a healthier animal. We don't have any chickens at the moment because we had a fox and mink in the stoat all in a very short period of time. We said we'll take a deep breath for a while. So we moved shop into our new store in Tralee, I'd say about 10 years ago now. We used to sell our meat inside in the shop, but we won't sell meat anymore. It's too hard to raise them. It isn't valued enough. The ability to process them and the stress of taking the animal from here and driving up the country in order to get them killed inside an organically approved abattoir, which is grand. But if you were here, like in my grandfather's time, my father's time, you could have gone to 5 or 6 different places on the peninsula. So we've had a consolidation of that processing, which means that a lot of smaller producers don't have the energy or the time to turn around and be able to produce meat locally. So again, what can we do? We need to reintroduce all those small processors. We need to take some of the legislation and the paperwork out of it so they can go back to doing business. Because a small abattoir or a small farmer producing a small amount of animals is not the health risk that's inside with a couple of 100,000 animals that are squeezed inside in a shed or being processed through a factory that people don't care too much about what's happening with the meat. So we need to relocalize again, and at least, not saying shift all our production, but at least turn around and create the opportunity that people have channels to directly process their meat or their vegetables locally and sell them into their local community directly, rather than them being exported and imported. We used to do markets and veg boxes, but we found ourselves getting busier and busier. We realised how important it was to build that direct relationship with our customers. So we knew we could grow food and supply it into a supermarket, but the legs could be cut out from underneath us. Also that we'd be producing pretty much a monocrop of what they wanted, whereas we wanted to create an ecosystem and try and have food coming out of that ecosystem that's sustainable into the long run rather than just in the immediate. The Manor field is 4 acres. And we have it divided into 6 sections for shelter because we're really exposed, and it's planted with alder and hazel and elderberry, and they create the little microclimates. And then inside in that we have a 3 crop rotation. We have our alliums, we have our brassicas and our legumes. So like our alliums would be our onions, scallions, garlic, and then our brassicas are all our kales. We used to grow cabbages and stuff, but kale is a great plant. I can plant it and we can sell everything inside into the shop, so you can keep harvesting throughout the year. And then our legume section would be peas and beans, and then we interplant our lettuce and our outdoor crops with that. And then inside in the tunnels, so we have our lettuce during the winter and scallions. Then during the summer we have tomatoes, cucumbers, and we've courgettes and stuff outside. And everything we grow here is supplied into the shop. I think the future is going to be small scale, loads of producers. That's why we want support for local food producers to help these people. If you had an acre land, you can grow a huge amount of food in it, and it can engage 2 or 3 people. If you've 3 to 4 acres, there's a huge amount you can do in that. On an acre of land, you can grow a good quantity of food. On 4 acres of land, you can grow a good quantity of food and have an ecosystem that will continuously support what's happening in it. And that is the future, a small local food production. You know, we will still be importing stuff for bananas and oranges, but actually as we go down the road, we need to be able to feed ourselves. And that's the kind of conversation of talking about food sovereignty over food security. You know, it's no good if we can't buy in the food. That's food security. Food sovereignty is owning the seeds, owning the land, having the knowledge and the understanding to be able to grow these things, and then have a community of support networks to help and show these people coming up how to grow the food. Yeah, but if you like your food, you know, you kind of have to go and get it yourself.